Please join me in welcoming Nancy Marshall to our annual Christmas lecture.
I hope I remembered to turn my own cell phone off, but I have some friends in the front row that will dig for it, hopefully. Thank you very much, John, for your generous introduction, and I also want to thank Allison Goff, the Director of the Education Department, for guiding me through this process. It's been most enjoyable, and I am just delighted to be here with all of you today in this very beautiful Flagler Museum setting and participating with you in all the other activities that are going to go on for the rest of the afternoon. And again, I welcome the people in cyberspace and those who are able to get here. And I just have to say that the person from Dallas is my son, and the person from Dubai is another son. And I have a daughter here with me, Janine, from Williamsburg, Virginia, and my other daughter lives where I live in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, and my husband of 58 years will be watching this or listening to it in between Tom Terrific Brady's passes for the Patriots. Anyway, I have been looking forward with great anticipation to this day because I love sharing my passion for this poem with all of you. And so let's begin our journey. "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled, all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. In the annals of Christmas literature, Clement Clarke Moore's beloved poem has never been equaled in universal appeal. Written in December 1822 and first published a year later in December 1823, this American version of the ancient St. Nicholas legend has delighted children of all ages for more than 188 years. Today, it is a holiday classic and much-loved tradition when a reading of the poem every Christmas Eve takes place in households across the land. I remember well this much-anticipated tradition as a child and then as a parent with my own family of 4 children, as I'm sure many of you do also. The legend of the Christmas Eve gift giver began early in the 4th century AD in Patara, Asia Minor, which is present-day Turkey. At that time, a young man by the name of Nicholas was required to give away all his worldly goods before he entered a monastery. He did this over a period of 3 evenings when everyone in the chosen household was asleep. Some say he put gold coins in the shoes of the 3 daughters in the family, and others that he used their stockings hung over the bedposts. It is said that Nicholas selected this family specifically for his beneficence because the father, they were a very poor family, could provide no dowry for his daughters and was considering selling them into slavery, or even worse, into prostitution. Soon, Nicholas became known for his love of children and as a gift giver. He eventually became a priest and then the Bishop of Myra. After Nicholas died in 343 AD, he became venerated as a saint by the people, though he was never formally canonized by the church that he had served virtually his entire life. Over time, festivals were held to celebrate the life of the beloved St. Nicholas. He even had his own feast day, December the 6th, which is Tuesday, when, according to legend, children found gifts waiting for them when they awoke. Other countries appreciated the spirit of St. Nicholas and included such a figure in their December celebrations. In the Netherlands, he was known as Sinterklaas. In England, as Father Christmas. And in Germany, as Pelsnickel. Italy had their San Nicola, France its Père Noël, and in Switzerland he was Christkindl. Russians called their Saint Nicholas Grandfather Frost, and in Austria he was just plain Nikolaus. And even China had its own Lan Kun. But when Clement Clarke Moore wrote his 56-line poem, he gave American children their own St. Nicholas, who is most often called Santa Claus in the United States, but sometimes St. Nick or even Kris Kringle. It was Thomas Nast, the famous illustrator and political cartoonist for Harper's Weekly, who took Moore's words and turned them into the image of Santa Claus, much as we know and love him today. Beginning in the 1860s, Nast spent more than 30 years drawing a rosy-cheeked, rotund, chubby, and plump, jolly old elf flying over rooftops, descending chimneys, filling stockings, putting toys under Christmas trees, smoking a pipe, fulfilling all of the actions in Moore's poem, wearing a red suit, usually, with fur trim, a flowing white beard, and having twinkling eyes. For an illustrator who created the Republican elephant, the Democratic donkey, and the Tammany Hall tiger, what fun Nast had for all those years depicting Santa Claus as he saw him. And he even changed often what he thought Santa Claus looked like. And here is another one showing the red suit. But not everyone who illustrated Moore's poem saw St. Nicholas or Santa Claus as Nast did. Here are 3 early 19th century versions. And when you see Santa in your mind's eye, close your eyes for a moment and open them up and see this Santa Claus. This is an 1848 engraving. This came out of the very first fully illustrated booklet of the complete poem. And you can clearly see the stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke that encircled his head like a wreath. This is one of my favorites. This is an 1837 oil painting, perhaps the first color illustration of St. Nicholas after Moore wrote his poem. And this was done by a great friend of his, Robert Weir, now owned by the New York Historical Society. And this one, also a favorite, an 1850s engraving showing St. Nicholas with a nose like a cherry. And don't you love the feather in his cap? But perhaps in your mind's eye, he looks even more like this Santa Claus, created for 30 years again between 1833 and 1964 for the Coca-Cola Company by the talented in-house artist Haddon Sundblom, and prominently featured, and I had a collection of these, on the back covers of National Geographic magazines for each of those 30 years. So we had an author. Clement Clarke Moore was born on July 15, 1779, in a large mansion on his parents' Chelsea estate that encompassed the area that is now 18th Street to 24th Street between 8th and 10th Avenues in Manhattan. Land originally purchased by his mother's parents. It was Moore's home for much of his life. This is a house itself was located what is now 8th Avenue and West 23rd Street. Clement was the only child of heiress Charity Clark and Dr. Benjamin Moore, who was bishop of the Protestant Episcopal Church of New York, rector of Trinity Church, and president of Columbia College, now of course Columbia University. Moore was educated at home in his early years, but he graduated first in his class from Columbia in 1798 at the age of 19. He also earned a master's degree there in 1801. In November 1813, Moore was 34 when he married 19-year-old Catherine Eliza Taylor, with whom he fathered 9 children. Moore was 43 when he wrote A Visit from St. Nicholas in 1822, and it was not until 1844, 22 years later, when he was 65, that he first acknowledged that he was the author of the famous verses, by including this poem in a small book of his other poetical works entitled Poems. His children asked him if he would put together this anthology of his work. But as early as 1837, editors who were publishing the poem had assigned him as the author. At the time he wrote A Visit from St. Nicholas, he was a professor of Oriental and Greek literature, as well as divinity and biblical learning at the General Theological Seminary of the Episcopal Church of New York. Located on land donated by the Bard of Chelsea himself, the seminary still stands today on 9th Avenue between 20th and 21st Streets in an area known as Chelsea Square. Moore's connection with that institution continued for over 25 years. Moore was a well-known and prolific scholar, as was Thomas Jefferson. Typical for an educated person of his period, Moore's publications related to a wide variety of topics, as well as religion, languages, politics, and poetry. He was also a gifted architect and a musician. At the young age of 30, he compiled a Hebrew lexicon, the first work of its kind in America. He translated Juvenal, who was a Roman poet. He edited his father's sermons. He wrote treatises and political pamphlets, including, and this is why Tom T.J. is up there, as we know him in Williamsburg, including his well-known 1804 attack on our third president in a pamphlet called Observations Upon Certain Passages in Mr. Jefferson's Notes on Virginia, which appear to have a tendency to subvert religion and establish a false philosophy. He was often a contributor to the editorial pages of the local New York City newspapers. Despite this scholarly input, it was the simple but magical poem about the mysterious Christmas Eve visitor that has kept the memory of Clement Clarke Moore alive for these 188 years. Although he was embarrassed for most of his life that his scholarly works were overshadowed by what he publicly considered a frivolous poem, Moore will forever be remembered as the person who truly gave St. Nicholas to the world. The poet of Christmas Eve lived a long and productive life and died in Newport, Rhode Island, in his summer home on July 10, 1863, just a few days short of his 84th birthday. He is buried in the Washington Heights area of New York City, along with members of his family, in Trinity Cemetery at the Church of the Intercession on Upper Broadway at 155th Street. I tell you all of that detail because every Christmas Eve there is a ceremony at his grave with lighted candles, the singing of carols, and of course, a reading of his famous poem, before the celebrants return to the church for a warm drink and happy memories. According to legend, Clement Clark Moore had the inspiration for his poem as he and his trusty Dutch servant were returning to Old Chelsea Mansion House from the downtown market in nearby New York town on a crisp and cool Christmas Eve afternoon in 1822. Eliza Moore had sent her husband to fetch yet another turkey that was needed to fill the last of several baskets for poor families, a yearly custom of this generous family. On the way home, as the horse pulling a sleigh with tinkling bells trotted over the snow-laden countryside, an idea started to germinate in Moore's fertile imagination. When he arrived home, he sat in front of the warm fire with his children, 6 at that time, as you can see from this slide, scampering around excitedly, for this was that special night when St. Nicholas would come to visit. Moore then excused himself and went to his study, indicating that he would return with a surprise before the children went to bed. Several hours later, he emerged, his Christmas gift to his children complete. The entire family gathered round, entranced as he began to read. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house. Although, as we have seen, the legend of the gift-giving Santa's gift giver had been around for many centuries, in a single evening, Clement Moore had created a piece of American literature that would be read and reread by children of all ages, the world over, especially on that most magical night of the year, the night before Christmas. According to tradition, a friend of the family, Miss Harriet Butler of Troy, New York, was visiting that fateful Christmas in 1822, heard Dr. Moore recite the poem, and copied it into her album. The following year, she took a copy to Orville Holley, the editor of her hometown newspaper, the Troy Sentinel. Holley published it anonymously for the first time on December 24th, 1823. And it was he who gave the title, Account of a Visit to St. Nicholas. It's fair to assume that Moore himself did not give his poem any title at all, since of the 4 known holograph copies written by him between 1853 and 1862, only 2 have the title, A Visit from St. Nicholas, while the others simply begin with the magical first line, excuse me, "Twas the night before Christmas." His original 1822 copy has never been found. This is the very first illustration for the poem that we are able to identify, and it was done in the late 1820s by Myron King as a broadside to accompany the Christmas Eve issues of the Troy Sentinel, the very same newspaper which first published his poem in 1823. The poem's popularity and appeal with the public started slowly at first, although the Troy Sentinel did republish it year after year, and it was picked up and reprinted as early as 1825 by other newspapers and almanacs, followed by magazines, anthologies, and books, until it soon acquired national and international recognition and fame. But no matter how much its popularity has become worldwide, the poem is truly an American phenomenon that will continue to bring joy to the hearts of young and old alike for many Christmases to come. Now, this is as good a time as any to mention a claim by the descendants of one Major Henry Livingston, Jr., who was born in 1748 and deceased in 1828, 35 years before Clement died. This has been the only serious and prolonged claim that someone other than Moore wrote the poem. Now, although Livingston himself never claimed that he wrote the poem, his descendants began actively asserting as early as the mid-1800s and as recently as 2000 and even up to this day that their ancestor was the author of The Night Before Christmas. They based their belief primarily on long-held oral family tradition that Livingston wrote the poem about 1804 to 1805. Important dates for you to remember. The descendants contend that Henry's nature, whereas Moore was a strict theologian who would not have written such child-friendly verses, Henry was a happy, jolly man, and the poem reflects his nature. It is their further contention that Moore took credit for the poem in 1844 only when no one else seems to have claimed it as their own. Throughout the years, however, few outside of the family seem to have heard of Major Livingston as the author of the poem. And most tellingly, I think, he never claimed to be the author. In addition, two indisputable facts continue to act as rebuttal to the Livingston family's claim, in my opinion. First, although Livingston left a large volume of his work in manuscript form, not a single line of the poem has ever been found among his papers, nor with any of his other poetical works. And second, although he had poems and other works published in newspapers in his native Poughkeepsie, New York, no one has ever been able to locate the poem in any such publication. One might also ponder how it came to be that many of the words and actions from Washington Irving's 1809 edition of Knickerbocker's History of New York could have found their way into a poem supposedly written by Livingston in 1804. I will have more on Washington Irving and his influence on Moore and the poem in a moment. But continuing the Livingston saga just a little longer. In 2000, Don Foster, an English professor at Vassar College, wrote a book entitled Author Unknown. One chapter of his work deals with the controversy regarding authorship of The Night Before Christmas and cites Foster's reasons for supporting the family's claim. His belief is based primarily on a comparative analysis of the use of specific words and phrases by Moore and Livingston in their other poetical works, and comparing the results of that analysis to the text of the poem. Despite Foster's analysis, however, and the claims of the Livingston family, I, as well as other Moore researchers, continue to believe that the strong evidence available to us supports Clement Clarke Moore as the true author of The Night Before Christmas. Now, Moore is often credited with at least 4 original contributions to the iconography of our conception of Santa Claus from the mid-19th century up until today. The 4 being, and in this slide you can see several of them, the sleigh, the 8 reindeer, Santa's fur, I have a granddaughter named Sarah, Santa's fur clothing and pipe, and finally his method of entrance and exit via the chimney instead of a door. Some of these fruits of his imagination, however, were almost certainly influenced by at least 3 publications that appeared in the years just prior to his writing the poem. The first, as I mentioned, was Knickerbocker's History of New York, published in 1809 by his close friend, Washington Irving. In that celebrated book, there are at least 24 allusions to St. Nicholas, who appeared to Olaf von Cortlandt in a dream, riding over the tops of the trees in that selfsame wagon wherein he brings his yearly presents to children. Other images that became part of Moore's poem were: the smoke from his pipe ascended into the air and spread like a cloud overhead. Also, laying his finger beside his nose gave a very significant look. And lastly, Mounting his wagon, he returned over the treetops and disappeared, and the people lifted up their voices and blessed the good St. Nicholas. A second influence may have been a 22-line verse published in December 1815 in The Spectator, a New York newspaper. And I will just quote a few lines so you can see the comparison. "O good holy man, when we Sancti Claus name, the nursery your praise shall proclaim. The day of your joyful visit returns, when each little bosom with gratitude burns for the gifts which at night you so kindly impart for the girls of your love and the boys of your heart. Then, Holy St. Nicholas, all the year, our books we will love and our parents revere. From naughty behavior we'll always refrain in hopes that you'll come and reward us again." A third publication, a small, color-illustrated juvenile booklet titled The Children's Friend, published anonymously, but printed by another friend and former Moore neighbor, William Gilly, appeared in 1821, only a year before Moore wrote his poem. As shown in this slide, in the illustration for these verses, Santa Claus is in a miniature sleigh drawn by only one reindeer. And there are 32 lines to that poem that begins, "Old Santa Claus with much delight his reindeer drives this frosty night o'er chimney tops and track of snow to bring his yearly gifts to you." So all of these influences notwithstanding, and Moore borrowed them, obviously, it was Moore who brought to life the images of the sleeping household where nothing was stirring, not even a mouse. Moore also created the action-packed and boldly named 8 reindeer: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donder, Blitzen. He described St. Nicholas's unique entrance into the house. Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound, and his equally unique egress, and laying his finger aside of his nose and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. This gesture of laying his finger aside of his nose was well known in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and it was the equivalent of our modern-day wink, denoting a shared joke or secret. Moore gave us the following visual images vividly of the physical characteristics of the mysterious Christmas Eve visitor. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf. This last illustration was done by L. Frank Baum, the creator of the Oz books. He clearly followed Moore's description of St. Nicholas with a little round belly, and much more elfin-like than the Santa we know today. Moore created these rhythmic verses that have endured in our memories for nearly 189 years. Moore also moved the St. Nicholas gift-giving events that had been taking place on December 5th, St. Nicholas Eve, to Christmas Eve, December 24th. So now let's talk a little bit about the American Christmas traditions that were influenced by Moore's poem. It has long been acknowledged that Moore's poem was instrumental in these American Christmas traditions. The verses created a scene of a very happy childhood at Christmas time. And this gave impetus to a newer appreciation of children during the holiday season and making them happy with special gifts. This was not always so, as this slide shows, with St. Nicholas carrying switches and dumping stones and rocks out of the bag. Previous to Moore's vision of a friendly and portly St. Nicholas, he was often frightening and austere, strict and not very loving. In the poem published in The Spectator, which I read before, there is a definite reference to good and bad children and whether St. Nicholas would bring any gifts based on past behavior. I have a personal anecdote that speaks to that. My mother, one of 5 children, was 10 years old in 1910. On that Christmas morning, while her brothers and sisters were rejoicing over the gifts in their stockings, my mother found only coal in hers. Of course, she was devastated, and she never fully understood why she had been singled out for that cruel behavior on the part of her own mother, who was the one responsible by all reports. My mother never forgot how she felt that Christmas morning, and to her dying day, she would recite that tale to me each Christmas, which always brought tears to her eyes and to mine, and continued to break her heart all over again. Moore does not specifically mention a Christmas tree in the poem, but it is a very important and central element in many of the illustrations for the poem. And although decorated Christmas trees have their roots in Germany, once we borrowed this artifact from across the ocean, it became one of the great American Christmas traditions, which flowered and flourished during the Gilded Age. The arrival of exquisite blown-glass Christmas ornaments from Germany came into their own for decorating the tree. And also, ornaments were made by hand in homes with whatever scraps of paper, even food, such as apples and popcorn, could be found. Many people were not happy when the Christmas tree took off in popularity, believing that the tree was taking the place of the traditional stocking and as the centerpiece of gifts and giving. However, they both live in harmony today, and the Christmas tree has become a necessary tradition in homes across the land wherever people celebrate the holiday. And I am so looking forward, as I'm sure you are, to the lighting of the gorgeous Flagler Museum tree with its beautiful ornaments later this afternoon. We recognize many Christmas traditions which are directly attributed to and influenced by Moore's poem, foremost among them being the aforementioned stockings hung by the chimney with care. And stockings are almost always directly related to Santa's entrance via the chimney and the fireplace, even with a roaring fire, as in this illustration. Sometimes, however, illustrators depicted St. Nick knocking at the door, as in this image of the first color illustrated edition of her father's poem, done in 1855 by Mary Moore. A highly unusual rendering here, since Mary, if you will recall the 1822 painting, was at her father's knee as he read, "Down the chimney, St. Nicholas came with a bound." And in this Mother Goose anthology of favorite poems, compiled in 1883, note that this St. Nicholas is miniature all the way and has only 6 reindeer. Illustrators have taken great liberties with the poem over the years. There is an 1869 edition which is illustrated with 10 reindeer in one double-page spread, and they even changed Moore's wording to read 10 tiny reindeer. And I also have an edition in my collection that has 12 reindeer, although they still kept Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, and so forth. But back to the chimney. In this slide, Santa is asking, how am I ever going to manage to get down here? I'm stuck. Sometimes a Father Christmas says this in Great Britain, what is it? You think I can possibly get down here with my bag full of toys? And I love this one. This St. Nicholas isn't even concerned about trying to get down the chimney. He just drops his toys in as he goes by. But no matter how he got into the sleeping household, St. Nicholas went straight to his work and filled all the stockings. This second view of St. Nicholas filling the stockings has a very special and nostalgic meaning for me. It was my first purchase of A Night Before Christmas, back in the late 1850s, to place near the fireplace in our home for, at that time, 2 of our eventual family of 4 children. I am pleased to say that Janine indicates to me that she remembers this book. This is how collecting begins, with one item that catches your imagination, so that each year I purchased another inexpensive Night Before Christmas picture book. This one, by the way, cost 29 cents, and I just saw it advertised as an opening bid on eBay for $40. Okay. One Christmas, however, when getting out the books, I realized that I was fascinated with the different ways that various illustrators and artists created the vivid scenes from Moore's poem, and thus a lifelong passion for collecting editions of the poem began, which continues unabated to this day. My collection now numbers over 1,400 items, as John said, and is happily ensconced in special collections at the College of William and Mary. But no matter how he got in, all right, sorry, I got lost. Moore's vision of St. Nicholas's arrival with the sleigh full of toys became symbolic with gift-giving to children. And accompanying St. Nicholas on his round are his 8 reindeer. And I need all of you to come with me and say the names of those reindeer. Let's go. Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donder, Blitzen. Very good, excellent. I had in here, okay, let's try that once more, but you did very well. Moore cited his story where the moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below. And so for those of us in the northern climes, when Santa Claus comes, we are often at a fire before we go to bed at night, and we love having that snow. And Moore showed a happy St. Nick opening his pack in this slide where he is seen pulling out a doll for the little girl of the home. A favorite tradition of children is to write letters to Santa Claus, most often for specific presents and assuring the jolly old elf that they have been good boys and girls all year long. Millions of letters go each year to Santa Claus, North Pole. And the USPS hires people to answer them, or at least as many as possible. Maybe not this year. They don't have any money. In this slide, the children didn't mail their letter, but waited until Christmas Eve and put it right in the fireplace where Santa is sure to see it. Food, as shown in this 1904 gold medal flower Christmas booklet, and drinking of spirits from the flaming wassail bowl, along with feasting and dancing, were traditional elements of the celebration of Christmas during the Gilded Age, when good fellowship and camaraderie prevailed. Entertaining family and friends with holiday parties became popular, particularly with those able to afford such occasions. Along with food and drink, feasting and dancing, Christmas began appearing in art and song, and all genre of music produced versions of The Night Before Christmas. Kris Kringle's March, Christmas carols, and this wonderful rendition by Grace Drayton, who drew the Campbell Soup Kids And you certainly can see that if they look familiar to you. And during the Gilded Age, the Flagler home was the scene of many joyous Christmas celebrations with entertaining of family and friends, good food, spicy drink, beautiful decorations, and music throughout the holiday season. Decorating the home at Christmas time was a custom that went back to the days of ancient Rome, but it was raised to a new art in the late 1800s and continues to this day. In the weeks before Christmas, houses are festooned with bright seasonal greenery, flowers, and decorations. And one of the most favored, of course, is the poinsettia, originally imported from Mexico, whose brilliant red leafy tracts represent the flaming star of Bethlehem. Greeting cards also became very popular during the Gilded Age. First introduced in England in 1843, they quickly became recognized in the United States as a way to extend greetings of the season to family and friends. And the first person who published Christmas cards in the United States was Louis Prang of Boston. He had a wonderful Christmas card. This is called the Panorama. It stretches out to 32 inches. Beautifully constructed, beautifully done, chromolithographs, very well sought after by collectors. And this card, done in 1907 by the famous artist Francis Brundage, a prolific illustrator of postcards as well as books, which shows the children in bed, but wide awake. Now, with all of these traditions influenced and inspired by Moore's Immortal poetry, there are just two more couplets to bring our Christmas Eve journey to a close. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Thank you very much for your attention. I hope we could have some time for some questions, and the people from cyberspace are also going to be able to ask some questions.
Yeah. What does down of a thistle mean?
The question was, what does down of a thistle mean? Well, in my limited experience, when thistles molt, so to speak, they are very light and they fly off. And so I think it means, that's what it means. Kind of like snowflakes. That's a good, John. Thank you.
Another question back here.
I have two questions, actually. One, when you were talking about the controversy about the authorship, you mentioned that Mr. Moore was quite strict and not known to be as lighthearted as the other gentlemen. So I wondered if you had any comments upon that, how he came up with this, if he wasn't known as that sort of person. And my son wanted to know where he got the idea of the reindeer. Do you know anything about that?
Well, the first question is, if Moore was so strict, how did he ever come up with such a jolly poem? It is some people's opinion that he was strict. He was a theologian. That doesn't mean all theologians are strict, I don't think, and without humor. He also was a very dedicated father, spent a lot of time with his children because he was a fairly young widower. His wife only was 37 when she died. And he was not as the Livingston family depicts him as being very strict and not very loving. And I don't agree with that because his other works don't show him. There's plenty of art, plenty of poetry that he has written that is very friendly, child-friendly and adult-friendly. The second part of the question was?
Reindeer.
Oh, well, I think he got the reindeer from Washington Irving. Washington Irving had a horse in his Knickerbocker's Holiday. Reindeer are winter animals, aren't they? Up in the northern climes, and perhaps he did that. I wish Clement were here right now so that we could ask him some of these questions.
We have a question online.
Yes.
Yeah, an online question. Has the night before Christmas ever been set to music? If so, is this popular to do so?
Yes, I think I just mentioned 3 different ways that it's been in music. Most of those slides you might not have been able to see, but it said at the top on the carol slide, the night before Christmas. And I have plenty in my collection of records, recordings, all the way from Perry Como, whom a lot of people here may remember. And they're still singing it. Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Another question back here? Man? Oh, you changed the mind.
Well, why do you put the angel and the star up on the tree?
Why do we put the angel and star on the tree?
Well, that's kind of you know what a pyramid looks, okay. Do you know what a pyramid looks like? So a pyramid looks like this, and this is the apex of the pyramid, and so it's a very prominent place, and I think we put things up there that we want people to see easily, and when you go in and see a Christmas tree, do you look up there and see? I think it's because it's an important spot, and that's why we put something up there that we like a lot.
Any other questions? One more?
Over the years, in some of the Night Before Christmas books, they have changed the name of the reindeer. Not Donder, but it's Donner.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder when that happened.
Well, editors have been very free in changing wording. As I explained, in some of the books that have 12 reindeer or 10 reindeer, they changed the text. See, there was no copyright in the days, and there never has been. Anybody can publish this book, this poem, and never receive any royalties of any kind except, the families, the original family couldn't. So I take as my Bible, so to speak, the one that he wrote in 1844 for his book, Poems. I consider that to be the definitive, not the first one that appeared in the Troy Sentinel, because the editor changed the name of those 2 reindeer. You have to have a baseline, you know. You're welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. That was terrific. I'm sure we all learned a lot. Young man, when you see our Christmas tree lit today, there won't be an angel and star at the top. There's a reproduction of a 19th century ornament at the top. We are much more patriotic, it seems, back in the 19th century and decorated our trees with Christmas with flags, of the American flags. In fact, if you look closely, you'll see the Christmas tree here has 20 different versions of the American flag because during Flagler's lifetime, the United States went from 24 states to 48 states just in his lifetime. So look for those different kinds of flags. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to Harris Bank for making this possible. Thank you to Nancy. Thank you to those who joined us online. Thank you all for being here.